Welcome to HomeSide Chats. This is Andrea French, Executive Director for TAG, Transportation Advocacy Group. And today we are honored to be joined by our Texas State Comptroller, Glenn Hegar. Glenn, welcome.
It's great to be with you.
Thank you so much for your time today. We know that everyone is busy managing a work and personal life, and you are by far part of the daily command center for our state. And so we really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, happy to do it.
So I just want to start by asking, what do your days look like now? Because as we all adjust to these changing times, our days are looking so different. And so I'm curious what yours feels like on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, they're very different. Normally on a Sunday night with myself, my family, we sit down and have dinner. My son, with one of my 12-year-olds, I have a 15-year-old daughter, a 12-year-old daughter, and a 12-year-old son. And it never fails. My son will always ask, so what's the schedule this week? Because I travel to Austin, I travel around the state, give speeches. My wife, she's manages a law firm in Houston, so she travels as well. And, you know, we try to never be gone at the same time. But point being is somebody's gone somewhere during the week. And so a few weeks ago during Sunday dinner, I said, okay, well, John, aren't you going to ask the question, what's the schedule for everybody this week? And of course, everybody laughed because they knew we were all going to be home together no matter what. And so it is extremely different because there's no traveling, no speeches. Everything is by video conference as we're doing, or phone calls. But for me, I've been essentially in Katy, at our home in Katy, working out of the house. The back porch is really my office. I just essentially do all the work. But I can say for the last 2.5 to 3 weeks, it has just been absolutely slammed. I mean, I am on phone calls with legislators pretty much all day, maybe trade associations, my staff, leadership offices. I mean, it is just because, unfortunately, this pandemic that we find ourselves in, this global, unfortunately, economic shutdown, and then with Texas having a double impact with trade wars on oil, that has been a significant hit to our economy. And so therefore, people are trying to figure out, at least from my office, say, for example, the economic data, what is happening and what do we think is going to happen to the state economy? And then secondly, with, as you know, one of my 3 constitutional responsibilities is collecting taxes. And so
Right.
Therefore, everybody's trying to figure out, Glenn, what do you have the authority to do? What are you going to do in coordination maybe with the governor's office, if there's something they can do that we can't do, and trying to make sure that whatever policies we're implementing, that it's fair and consistent. And so for me, I'm normally in shorts and a t-shirt sitting on the back porch conducting my work. I have a jacket on, and the first time I put this on a week or so ago for an interview, my youngest daughter looked at me and thought, why are you wearing a jacket with your shorts? That looks awful. And in fact, she laughed at me just a minute ago as I went upstairs to find myself a quiet spot to do this. And she went, I guess he's doing another interview, but that looks so weird. So that's just a little bit of a glance. It's been busy constantly, and we're trying to give as much data and information as we can, and unfortunately a very uncertain economic time that we're living in.
Right. And I know that it's a constantly changing target, right? So I think daily, hourly, minute. And so it's really hard to put those concrete numbers out there. And I know people are searching for something to hang on to be able to make a decision for their business or, for their work. And so can you talk a little bit about, you've had some conversations with legislators, and during those conversations, I think it was referenced that you said if we can liken this to anything in our recent history, it might be 9/11, but still very, very, very different. So can you describe a little bit about maybe some of the response and the lessons from 9/11 and how we can kind of apply that to our current situation?
Yeah, if you look at the current situation we're in, we've never seen essentially just a collapse in big portions of our economy, whether it's restaurants, hotels, airline industries. And then we don't think about the dry cleaners, the daycare centers,
Right.
the people that are selling tires, that do automotive repair shops. I mean, all of these different ancillary businesses that may not have a large advocacy group, but they are being impacted as well. And so, what we've tried to do is go back and look at 9/11 because that was analogous, is at least in the airline industry as well as hotels, because 40% of all travel is vacation oriented, and obviously none of that is going on right now. and
Right.
then also looking at the great financial crisis, because neither one of those are really exact parallels to this event, but at least trying to get a glimpse on what happened in certain industry sectors and also what happened to the state treasury, as in revenues into the state of Texas. And a lot of people are asking, oh, well, Glenn, when you're starting to collect sales tax and on March the 20th is 20th of each month is when they start coming in through the rest of the month, you'll get a glimpse. And say, for example, as we're getting our tax collections into the state treasury, the money that we collected last month in March, that was actually sales tax that were collected by businesses in February. And so the point being is there is a month lag each month. And so therefore the economy was fully engaged and active throughout the month of February. And so we had a positive month with our March collections because it was February economic activity. And when we show our collections in April of this month, that's actually for March. And so we'll probably see some glimpse of what happened in the economy for sales tax collections. But as we all know, the impact of Texas businesses didn't hit until roughly around March the 14th. And so March was half of a month with social distancing and economic shutdown, and half a month that was continuing to operate at normal levels.
Right.
So for us, as I'm telling policymakers and leadership, at least from data that we have in our collections, it's not going to show up for a couple months. When we have what's going on in April right now, we really won't get those numbers until the end of next month when we collect those. And so there's a lag impact. But we've gone back and looked at, prior events, whether it was the great financial crisis, 9/11, how did it impact? Because unfortunately we are in an economic slowdown. We know it's going to have a negative impact. We're just trying to figure out how quick and how deep so we can provide real data and information to policymakers as well as the public so they know what is this doing to not only businesses and individuals, but the state treasury. But Texas has a lot of the tools in the toolbox, and we're in a little better shape than other states, thankfully.
Right. And one of them is our economic stabilization fund, right? I mean, we do have a more robust chest of dollars. However, it is tied very much to the oil and gas industry. And so can you share, I know there are some kind of standards for the threshold of the rainy day fund. And what are some of the triggers for the amounts that need to be in there for everybody to feel comfortable, and what happens?
If you look at our economic stabilization fund, or better known as the rainy day fund, we are in a much healthier balance than many other states. I mean, it's one of the largest savings accounts in the nation. Today, it has a little over $10 billion in it. However, with that being said, as you know, the legislature made large appropriations out of it last session. There's about $2.5 billion yet that was appropriated that hasn't been drawn out. Now, those dollars are for state schools, remodeling. That's also for some of the flood mitigation planning that was going to be done as a result of Hurricane Harvey. And then also it's dollars that are going to certain university institutions, as well as also going to different state agencies as a result of Hurricane Harvey. And so the point being is, once you subtract that $2.5 billion out, we originally had estimated, because of oil and gas severance collections this fiscal year, that we would add about another 1.6 billion later this year when we close the fiscal year at the end of August. However, obviously that number is going to go down. But one good thing is we've already had almost half of the collections in this fiscal year. So the point being, as I've told several people, we feel pretty confident when the legislature gets back into session. If you take the 10 minus the 2.5, add another billion plus into the state savings account, we'll probably comfortably have around 8.5 billion when they get back into session in January of 2021, which is a large, sizable amount of dollars. And then you take into account, whether it is federal dollars that's come into the state, as well as the local governments. The federal government in package number 2 increased our match to all the states by 6.2% for Medicaid. And that results in about an extra $1 billion to the state of Texas. I was on a Treasury call that we're all advocating to try to continue to keep that match increased, which will significantly help the state of Texas. So there's just several tools, but the point being is, I would suspect that later this year we'll transfer about another $1 billion plus somewhere around, both to the Economic Stabilization Fund and over to transportation for transportation funding as that transfer. And then as they get into session, part of the question becomes, how much do they use? Because as you know, once it gets below roughly $7.5 billion, if I recall, then you have transportation dollars pause until it gets to that threshold. And we just
Right.
really don't know the amount of dollars that they may withdraw. And then in a couple of years, in the next biennium, that 7.5 billion moves up slightly higher. And so
Right.
it's kind of really hard at this point because we just have insufficient, collection data and won't for several months to be able to even anticipate come January, what are the needs to use ESF dollars? Will that impact transportation funding? It's just really too early to be able to tell.
Right. Right. And that is what's the conversations that are circling.
Right.
And I
I
think
understand.
yeah, prior to this pandemic, transportation, we had a great transportation forum, and I think it was the end of January, early February, really talking about some new policy initiatives and new funding
Right.
opportunities. And we really feel as if at this point the policy board gets a bit wiped. And I don't know if you would share that sentiment entirely, but for infrastructure and kind of new funding streams, we're all going to be really looking at how we can just maintain going
Yeah,
into this.
I think that's exactly the case. I mean, if anybody's looking for a new revenue stream, now is not the time to advocate for that in any shape, form,
Right.
or fashion.
Right.
We are going to have to use every mechanism that we have as far as the state to be able to get over this hurdle because we just don't know how deep it's going to be. And, earlier we were talking about, the great financial crisis as well as 9/11. And just to make a couple of points, right after 9/11, hotel receipts dropped by 28% in October compared to the October before.
Okay.
November was more like 20 in almost 30%. But
Okay.
yet after about August of the next year, it started increasing slightly again. And if you look
Okay.
after the great financial crisis, motor vehicle sales, they dropped immediately, as in
Right.
the next month in September. And they really were at a decline or continued to stay at a decline for about 18 months. And so they
Right.
were down 18% for 18 months compared to the 18 months prior, which is a significant decline in sales tax. They
Right.
declined. It was a lag of about 6 months. So it took a while for that to have an impact in state revenues. Yet today is very different than the financial crisis because so much economic activity has been shut down to
Right.
continue to social distance. So the point being is, I think we're going to see those impacts much quicker. There won't be a 6 month lag. And when we did have that impact 6 months later after the financial crisis, it was down almost 10% for 14 months. And so I think, we can safely assume, unfortunately, that
Right.
it's going to be down to similar numbers, but it's going to be quicker than it was before.
Do you have a sense for, there's been conversations, we have our session, which would normally start in January, a need for a special session, depending on, as you mentioned, as the numbers roll out, May, June, we just don't, I know it's a lot of uncertainty with how
Right.
long this is going to last, but, I just don't, I'm not sure what some of the conversations are. And if you feel at some point there needs to be, a special session to address some of the.
Personally, I don't think that they need to come into special session, and the reason is that regular session is going to be in January of next year, so that's
Right.
going to be here quicker than we can ever begin to imagine. The days and the
Right.
weeks are really going by so fast. I mean, in my team, we'll give an update on something, and somebody says, "Well, it felt like it was 8,000 years ago," just because
Right.
it's so busy right now, but it's moving so rapidly, and literally just in 8 months they'll be in session. And the Treasury, we have enough money to cash flow. We have a lot of tools in the toolbox. I can use part of the economic stabilization fund if I need to for cash flow purposes.
Without
And
a
so
special.
there, without a special session, I have that authority. We do it already. At times when we have a mismatch of revenues as well as expenditures, they're going out of the Treasury. And so we have different mechanisms. So I don't feel as though the state Treasury needs that, nor is there anything that they need to come in because the governor has wide discretion and the lieutenant governor and the speaker does through their authority to move money around. So when the
Okay.
governor depletes all of his disaster recovery money, as he did during Hurricane Harvey, then my office, we go and identify dollars that have not been appropriated or available, and they
Right.
can move those around. And so we have a lot of flexibility. And then also the federal government in package number 3, whether, some of y'all have probably been paying attention to this, roughly we kind of calculate today, and it's still a little too early to know exact numbers, but there's about $11 billion that is supposed to flow to the state of Texas, as in Texas and local governments. Now,
Right.
local governments of a certain size and above can be able to get as most about 45% of those dollars. So let's just assume they do. Well, then
Mhm.
that would still be over $6 billion for COVID type response for the state
Right.
of Texas. And all these different moving pieces, I just don't see a need for them to come into session because we have the ability to move money around to deal with the response that we need to with the
Right.
dollars and the authorities that we have.
No, that's great. I think it's a testament to some of the conservative fiscal approach that we've had in Texas for so many, for decades, where you truly reserve uh, the rainy day fund for emergencies, and you truly allocate funds, as needed and as appropriate. And so, I mean, we never would have anticipated a moment like this, but it is. So, into that a little bit. I am curious, kind of, what is your message to lawmakers that are so uneasy right now in hearing from their constituents? Is it just a message of be safe, stay home, work in good faith moving forward, and we're going to figure this out? It's just going to be some time, or, do they have comfort in the fact that some of these decisions can be made without their input?
Yeah, well, first, if it was 2 weeks ago, I was very hesitant to use a word that starts with an R, recession. But
Yes.
literally, in a few days later, I felt as though it's very critical and important that we go ahead and paint the picture for what it is. We're
Right.
living in a global economic shutdown across the entire world, and Texas being 19% of all exports out of this country, we're very tied to the international economy, and especially with the double impact of the price war on oil right now and the
Right.
collapse in oil price. So, I felt like it's really critical to let people know, yes, we are in a recession. We don't think it's going to be a quick recovery. It's going to be a longer recovery. But the fact is Texas has a strong balance sheet compared to other states. We have the ability to cash flow. I've been on Treasury calls with colleagues, and several times my deputy and I, in the first call, she was texting me back and forth because we're obviously in different places, and just said, "Oh, I'm not going to say anything because my gosh, we're in such a better shape than these other states. That's awful." And so they're having real cash flow issues. So we don't have that. But
Okay.
also being very sympathetic that there are a lot of people that are having severe economic issues right now. And,
Right.
what can we do to help alleviate some of those, yet also make sure that we are consistent in our policies, that we are fair across the entire table to everybody. And so, just trying to have those decisions and making sure that everybody is on top of the current economic situation. And even though we don't have good, solid data, we're trying to get it as quick as we can and already know and script out that when I first started as a legislator in 2003, we had a significantly tight budget cycle and we had to make
Right.
cuts to the state budget and use a lot of tools. In 2009, I was in the Senate and we had to use a lot of tools. This one
Right.
is going to be equally as bad, if not worse, unfortunately. And fortunately, Texas has a lot of tools in our toolbox. I keep using that word, but that's really kind of what we do, and we're going to have to use those. And so I just at least want to start managing expectations,
Right.
but also manage expectations that we have been through this before.
Mm-hmm.
We've got through it. We've weathered the storms, and we're going to be able to weather this storm as well. But we're going to have to use all the different levers that we have to be able to
Right.
get through it. But we need to do it in a very educated and responsible manner and make sure that we have all the facts and not be overreactionary.
Right. And I think that's difficult to do in times like this, with so much noise. We've got the 24/7 news cycle, and there's so much information. Some of it's helpful, some of it's not helpful, some
That's
of
right.
it's accurate. So,
That's right.
um, what I've appreciated all of these,
For 2 weeks, I have not looked at Twitter. Twitter is not going to be my news
that's a
feed. I can
good,
say that.
that's a
I mean,
good policy.
I don't even open it anymore, just
Not,
because.
not TikTok, not Instagram.
Yeah. And how do you get good, real, solid information? Because it's an overload, as you mentioned, and trying to make sure. And I've asked my team. I have the revenue estimating division that we get all, and we work with all of our entities that we subscribe to for our revenue forecasting, and then the trust company that does all the investment, and they get all the information from the financial sectors, and those sometimes match, but they're really different types of information. And so 2.5 weeks ago, I told him, I said, normally we wouldn't be sharing all this data across the two divisions, but it's really critical that we do because it's different prisms that you're looking through. And I want every single piece of information to come to me because you're trying to make sure you have real good, solid information and where that data matches up. So you can start making sure that you at least tell people what we do know that is going on.
Right, right. Can you talk a little bit about, what I always appreciate is that you have a constant running uh, list of numbers in your brain that you can just, I mean, it is phenomenal to me. But talking about the recovery and what it looked like after 9/11, the sectors and the industries that were kind of the job stimulus ones. So we know that infrastructure investment is usually a quick job creator. It also is in my opinion, kind of infusing cash and income back into the economy. And so can you talk about some of the different sectors that did maybe recover a little faster or were helpful in the recovery, after 9/11?
Yeah, obviously those that are in the tourism industry, the
Mhm.
airline industry, hotels, any of those that are related in those areas are going to be the ones that are harder hit on the front end and have a longer lag. As you
Right,
mentioned, in potential construction areas, whether it's infrastructure, I think there's one reason that in DC, the president and Congress right now is talking about as of a fourth package that would probably be more tailored towards states, local governments, and also infrastructure funding.
yes,
And
yeah.
so therefore, I think that, that rightfully looking at how do you infuse dollars in projects that we need to have happen. As I've talked to leadership and, and your members know that one of the levers that legislators have is if they want to take a vote next session, then they could literally, the 2.5 billion that goes to transportation from sales tax could be cut in half. Now, one of the
Right.
things you don't want to have happen is to, stall projects at a time like this.
Right.
Yet, I would say dollars, if there is an infrastructure package that comes from Washington, D.C., then that would give legislature an ability, if they wanted to supplement the state side of it, if you make my point,
Right.
with the
Right.
federal dollars. Well, it's still whole, and I know everybody says we can always use more projects. I understand that. I've heard it for
Right.
18 years that I've been elected. I got it.
Yeah.
But there still is only so much bandwidth that
Right.
TxDOT and local governments, especially in these types of situations, can push projects out the door. And so,
Right.
to me at least, the way I would advocate is if we can keep everything whole as it is,
Hmm.
that's still a significant amount of work. And if you can supplement that with additional work, that's good because
Right.
that's real jobs that are out in the economy. You don't want to go backwards, but also I think we need to be realistic. Is it going to be a significant infusion of a doubling or tripling, a
Right.
project, which
Right.
there's a capacity issue and we all
Right.
recognize that. And so at least from my mindset, I'm not having too many discussions with leadership on that now, but I'm
Okay.
just trying to think of all the different pieces of expenditures out, revenues in,
Hmm.
how do you put the jigsaw puzzle together in a little bit different manner than we've done before to weather this storm.
Right. No, and I appreciate that. I think one of the things we're also thinking about with transportation is how this could shape some of the policy decisions on the types of ways that we do fund projects, right? So in the past, public-private partnerships and tolling, CDAs, and all of those have taken a little bit of a hit in some of the conversations. And so, does this help or hurt those conversations? We talk about tools in the toolbox, and that's one of the things that we talk about, where we understand you don't want to utilize tolling and you don't want to utilize things over use of it, but are the tools carefully used when properly used, are they good to kind of have in that toolbox? And so that's what we're also kind of looking at and staying on top of.
Yeah,
um,
what I would advocate is I think it's good to have that checklist and know what those things potentially are. I think
mhm,
it's a little too early to try to have those conversations with
right.
members and leadership just because they're literally just overwhelmed with constituent questions. And, it's really not the time for those discussions. But I do think trying to have that list and think about how some of these things could be of assistance
Right.
is extremely important right now. And as we get a little bit further into this and hopefully get past the social distance and get the
Right.
economy back moving again, and as we get it several months into this, then we can start beginning to, think about how do we use some of the different tools that are out there and how do you lever them to be able to make sure we can have a better economic impact
Right.
for the people here in the state.
Right. And sometimes people throw around words with, you said recession, and you're finally comfortable kind of using that. Some people have said,
Still not comfortable, but
well,
I
no,
will
that's
at least
right.
say it. I know I'm
That's
teasing.
comfortable. No.
I understand.
Right. We've resigned ourselves to use that phrase. At what point in history, things have been referred to as a depression. What signifies that? Is that just a cultural kind of embrace, we embrace that we're here in this moment and it is a depression, or do we wait until we have more numbers and to see how long it lasts, and that makes it more of a
Yeah,
depression?
let's hope we don't have one that starts with a D, a depression, because that's a much more drastic economic impact than a recession. Obviously, there's no real good definition that defines one or the other. I think
Right.
as there's an old saying that says a recession is when your neighbor loses their job. A depression
Hmm.
is when you lose your job.
Okay.
And
That's
that's not a real good, clear scientific answer. But the point is I think the issue is when it becomes much more personal and there's more
right.
significant numbers of people. And so there's not really a good test one way or the other. What I hope is that we're able to infuse enough dollars into the economy, give
Mhm.
businesses the opportunities to continue to get back into operation, and kind of keep that economic impact to as minimal as possible, because hopefully we can shorten the curve as in the recovery coming back out of this.
Right. And you mentioned, that's a great kind of example of, our neighbor, and then if it affects us, and that's very similar to the actual cases that are coming out and the numbers that are increasing. We're all starting to experience, it's much, I don't want to say it's easier, but it's less impactful when we hear about it in other countries or we hear about it in other states, right? And so, I would kind of ask you from a more personal standpoint, how has this impacted you and your family? And kind of how are you all keeping your clarity and your focus and your resolve during all of this? Because it's a lot. It's a lot.
It is a lot, and for us, my wife and I mean, she's constantly on calls and
Mhm.
meetings, and I am as well, and we're trying to have that balance to where we're making sure our kids are staying busy with
Mhm.
school, which has been good. My freshman in high school, she's much busier during the day with schoolwork now. The twins
Mhm.
in fifth grade are not as much, so there'll be times I may not be on a video, but I'm on a call, and I'm out in the backyard throwing a football with my son. Or yesterday, I was on the phone with the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and he said, "Oh, I can let you go." And I said, "No, as long as you don't mind that I'm playing horse with my kids right now, the twins out front. Are you
Mhm.
okay that we continue to talk?" And so, everybody's been a little flexible and understanding that
Mhm.
it's just a lot different
Yeah.
times than we've lived in. And at least one of the blessings for my family, and I think about this every single day, is that in the past we knew we were going to have dinner as a family on Sunday nights, no matter what. And we would try
Mhm.
to do it later in the week, but with everybody having different schedules, one parent may be taking a kid here or a kid there. Yet
Right.
I have breakfast, lunch, and dinner with my kids every day.
Right.
And as a family, it has been really remarkable. We're blessed that my three kids, I mean, they're siblings, let's just be honest, but they're
Yeah.
also have good relationships, and it's really been remarkable to watch
Mhm.
a tighter family unit.
Right.
Unfortunately, because of the situation that we're in, but me in my office at least, I just have great staff, and my staff is level-headed. They're looking for the real facts and the real data. We're trying to make sure we're educated, and we're trying
Mhm.
to educate others with the information that we have. And so I think the combination of that family security
Right.
is really important to kind of my mental health. And unfortunately, I'm not able to go to the local Y and work out, but I've got an
Right.
elliptical right here at the house, and I try to do a little workout here at the house every single day because I can't really go anywhere else. And so, my point being, at least from the work side of it,
Mhm.
family side of it, the mental physical side of it, I'm fortunate enough that I can balance all those, and it also kind of realizes I'm looking around what's going on in our state, our nation, and the world.
Mhm.
A lot of other people don't have that ability, and
Right.
and it's just literally every day. I mean, my heart pours out to people that are significantly impacted by this in so many more ways than we are.
Yeah.
It's just
No.
unfortunately.
Absolutely. I would kind of ask two final questions. One is, what is kind of your one piece that you feel like maybe you've repeated, of advice or suggestion to businesses, lawmakers, people that do have the fortunate opportunity to help get us back on our feet, get themselves back on their feet. Um, what has kind of been is there a repetitive message that's kind of coming out that you feel has been helpful, that you're sharing?
I think one, just trying to make sure that we're all trying to provide information and help to those that need it. Making sure that we are having the right facts. We're not being overreactionary. We're not trying to fan, unfortunately, the flames of confusion. Trying to make sure that we're educating not only ourselves but others, and then also what are the things that we can do to look out that we're going to get past this. There's a lot of people that are hurting, a lot of different local governments that are going to have to really figure out how they can get past this. And this is what I've challenged my team. How can we make sure we get better information out to those who really need it? Say, for example, businesses that are trying to utilize some of the packages that Congress just passed. How do we make sure that we can help assist, get the right information to help them work through this myriad of complicated process to get them back to work as quick as they can? So I thought, that's kind of my challenge to my team. And there's a lot of people doing that, but you want to make sure that people have an easy place that they can go through to and help walk through these difficult scenarios that they need to walk through.
Yes, no, and what the 3 pillars that we are working with at TAG is the calm, connected, and committed, right? So we're calm, we're receiving information, we're able to provide information to our members and our supporters. We stay connected as we can, and then we're committed. We're committed to get through this and figure out a path that lifts everybody up. And then, I would say also we're going to be hosting webinars and things that help talk about some of the relief packages that are coming through the pipeline for small businesses, maybe our, engineering firms and construction firms, and even smaller businesses that are members obviously can help with that. But there is this influx of information. And so how do you,
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So I
in a calm, connected manner to disseminate information.
Yes. So finally, I will end with kind of just a fun things that we are learning about ourselves in these moments. I have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, and I have learned that I am an extrovert, like times 10. However, I do have limits, and I kind of need the space thing is a little, as I imagined with you as well. So, I am curious. You talked about exercise. I've had to kind of retool my exercise expectations or routines. So what is something that's maybe surprised you that you've learned about yourself or your family through all of this so far?
Yeah, well, one of the things we're learning is I'm trying to become a much more diverse cook than I have in the past, trying to give a little diversity in the house. And so, it's kind of been funny because my kids, my son, he's like Mikey, he'll eat anything, the old TV commercial, but
right. Yes, I do.
The girls and so, that's one thing that I've kind of taken as a challenge. Well, we have an opportunity, let's have a little bit of diversity and let's do something outside the box than we normally would. And then, I think part of it is just, I enjoy, obviously a little bit of space or being outdoors, which is obviously a little more challenging. I've learned in the last couple of days that I'm not as good at basketball as my 12-year-old daughter. I didn't know that until the other day. So yesterday she was talking trash that she was going to beat me pretty hard in the game. And, it was kind of comical, but I didn't know I enjoyed to ride bicycles as much as I do. Here in our community, we have a little lake. And so me and the twins will go ride bikes, or the oldest one would probably do it 3 times a day, just to break up the monotony in the day, just to take off and go a little bit, come back. And so, we're trying to find different ways to keep ourselves engaged, both mentally, physically, and spiritually. How do you do those things? Because you're limited on what you can do. But it's really amazing how I think our lives are going to be severely changed in the way we go about doing business and we socialize with others. It's really remarkable.
And I think, I watched something yesterday, kind of a motivational message, and saying the people that are really struggling with this moment are people that really want to return back, right? They want it back, they want their life back. And the reality is that each of us will come out of this different, right? And we kind of we have to really have peace with that things are going to change, and we're not going to switch back to what was considered normal life. We will make different decisions. We will have different relationships, and probably for the positive, right? So kind of looking at that. So I really appreciate your time today. And I look forward to, future conversations at some point. And I appreciate that you have a very tactical approach to everything that we've talked about, and kind of saying, like, these are the tools. we kind of know what we can do, and we're gonna take it one day at a time. So that's very helpful.
I appreciate that and appreciate y'all disseminate information in a calm manner. And also want to say I'm looking forward to the opportunity when I get to come see the group again in person. And we can all be together again, kind of as extroverts. We can. I don't know if we'll shake hands as much as we used to, but you know, I think that is changing. But the point is, we can still get together here, hopefully, you know, in the coming months, and get back to having meetings and don't have to do them all via through our computers or our phones.
Thank you for joining us for HomeSide Chats. We hope that you enjoyed today's episode. This series would not be possible without the sponsorship from our mobility partners. We'd also like to take a moment to thank H&TB, our signature sponsor for today's episode. Stay tuned for more episodes of HomeSide Chats, and we wish you, yours, your family, and friends peace and health.